What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. This is the Let's Play podcast where we discuss all things related to books and video games. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Charlotte.
With the dust settled on a jam-packed 2024, we're going to turn our attention to our most anticipated games and books from 2025. How are you doing, Charlotte?
I'm doing good. There are years where there's stuff where I'm not super excited about, but I feel very good about this year.
Yes, I had actually a pretty hard time putting my list together because there really is a lot of stuff that I'm genuinely excited about. So, Charlotte, would you like to kick things off with a anticipated game for 2025?
Yeah, for sure. And there are a lot of games without release dates this year because I know everyone's theorizing that everyone's afraid to set a release date because GTA 6 could drop whenever in theory. But my first game is one that actually has a release date and is very soon. It's Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii.
I am not surprised at all that that is one of your picks.
So my first caveat is I am not the biggest fan of pirate games, just as a concept. It's a genre where I like pirates, but it's never, there are many games where it doesn't entirely click. So when this was first announced, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But because I love the Yakuza series and I trust RGG really to do a fun game in a fun setting, and I know Majima is a character that everyone loves a lot and is really fun to play as, so I'm really hoping that this game will be fun, and I am really excited to play it next month.
Yeah, I was also interested in this one, but I'm kind of like the opposite of you because I love pirate games and anything to do with pirates, but I've never played any of the Yakuza games, so I'm a little hesitant to kind of jump in with this one. I think I might have to do some homework before I do that. So can you just explain to me a little bit how is it connected? It's not like pirates from, the 18th century, right? It's like a modern day take?
Yeah, it's a modern day, so it's one of the popular characters, Majima, who it actually could be a good entry point for you just because kind of the inciting incident is he has lost his memory and he's here in Hawaii being a pirate. So
wasn't that one of the other games too?
I mean, it's an easy narrative hook to be we don't need
true,
people to play the 8 previous entries.
Fair point. Wasn't the last game in Hawaii too?
Yeah, so RGG is pretty their bread and butter is they kind of narrow down on a setting and kind of reuse that for their games, which also is helpful in that it keeps them very strict to their they basically do 2 releases a year and they always deliver on that. So it's nice to have that regularity when other release dates are so up in the air.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to check that one out. And did you say when the release date is?
Yeah, it's February 21st.
So my first pick, and like you, I tried to narrow down my picks to either games that I knew were coming out either imminently or I was pretty certain that they're get a stick with a 2025 release date and not get delayed. So my first pick is a game called Split Fiction, which was actually announced at the Game Awards, which we watched together during our live stream. Do you remember that one?
I block all time we spend together out of my mind.
Yeah, I was pretty interested in this one. It's by Hazelight, the company Hazelight, which I really like them because they do a lot of innovation and there's a lot of variety in their games. And also, I feel like they do a really good job of reinforcing whatever themes they're exploring in the story with the gameplay mechanics, with games like Brothers and It Takes Two, which I both really liked. This one's a co-op game, much like It Takes Two, and it's about 2 aspiring writers who are trying to get published by a futuristic tech company, which could apparently turn their stories into life via a simulation. And eventually, they both get sucked into the simulation, and in order to fight their way out, they have to play through these co-op levels that are based on the worlds that they've created. Part of the reason why I'm excited about this is for selfish reasons, because I think here at Let's Play, we're always excited about any game that features authors, and this one actually has 2. One of them is a science fiction writer, and the other one is a fantasy writer. And I think their sort of mutual, skepticism and attitudes towards each other's respective genres very much comes into play with their dynamic and the storytelling as they're sort of fighting their way through these varying levels of science fiction and fantasy settings. So I'm definitely very excited about it.
Yeah, I feel like that's also, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that because, anything where you're kind of going back and forth between characters can be tricky to pull off correctly.
Yeah, I was thinking this is definitely a game that we should try to cover in some fashion. Maybe we can play it together, or better yet, maybe we can get a science fiction and a fantasy author to play.
Impossible.
Who would have thought? What about you? Would you say you're more of a science fiction person or a fantasy person? Are you a Mio or a Zoe?
I'm definitely a fantasy person, and I feel like even when I venture into the sci-fi world, it's probably more the space fantasy versus sci-fi.
Yeah, I think for me it kind of depends. I think when it comes to movies, I'm definitely more of a sci-fi person, but for some reason when it comes to books and video games, I think I gravitate more towards fantasy.
Are authors cool now? Are authors cool now?
Split Fiction by Hazelight is set for release March 6th on all major platforms. So Charlotte, what is your first book pick?
So kind of expanding off the sci-fi fantasy world, my first book pick is actually the next book by Robert Jackson Bennett. The first one was The Tainted Cup, which came out end of 2024. And the next one is going to be A Drop of Corruption, which is a really fun, fantasy. It's not fun. It's a really depressing world that they live in. But
depressing can be fun.
It's like a detective mystery, definitely inspired by Sherlock Holmes, that takes place in a world where, there are these walls built to keep out these sea monsters in this society. And the main character, Din, is kind of this detective's assistant to an older female detective. And the first one was really fun, and I'm just really excited for the next one in the series because I always feel like this, sophomore in a series is kind of oh, you had a really fun first entry. Where are we going to go from here? And this one really stands out to me because I enjoy a male-female book plot where they are not romantically entwined. Something that I really love about the world in this series is so essentially characters are kind of modified. They have these special modifications to make them better at the jobs they're doing. The main character, Din,
he's kind of like Gattaca?
Kind of. Yeah, he's been modified so that he has picture perfect memory, which is something that you could really easily be okay, he can remember everything. But there are very clear rules set in place about these modifications have ramifications. And also he kind of has a system where he can remember everything, but he uses smell to specifically remember, cases he's sent on. Oh. So he has to have these special oils that he smells when he's investigating a crime scene so that he can later recreate it. And it's just a really fun way to be he has this superpower, but it's, there are rules. It doesn't just solve everything magically.
Yeah. I love fantasy stories where there's a price to the magic or there's some kind of limit that makes sense within the world building. Otherwise, you can just obviously go willy-nilly with all the problem solving. Sweet. That actually sounds like it would make an interesting video game when you're describing it.
This one actually I picked up because I was putting together lists of potential books for a Let's Play book club. So definitely this is one that I think everyone in the Let's Play audience should check out.
Nice.
Back to the void with it. What is your first book?
My first book pick is called Fagin the Thief by Alison Epstein, which is sort of a imagined origin story about this character, Fagin, who some people may remember from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. He's this expert pickpocket that kidnaps children to train them to be his army of pickpockets, I think. But anyway, in this version, it sort of traces his beginnings as he sort of gets mentored by this expert pickpocket and learns sort of the tricks of his trade. And then he eventually becomes an expert and tries to recruit his own sort of guild of thieves. And they kind of wreak havoc in this reimagined 19th century London setting.
I feel like thieves are also very in that space.
It definitely reminded me a lot of the settings with games like the Dishonored series or maybe Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And I think this author in particular, she does a really good job at writing stories that they are historical fiction, but they're also very suspenseful and they usually teeter on the edge of morality. She has a really good sense of humor too. Her Substack is chock full of historical memes, which I'm always happy to
What a
consume.
Sentence you just said to me.
Fagin the Thief comes out on February 25th. All right, Charlotte, what is your next game pick?
So I guess going off your book pick, I will go something that's kind of the same historical era, but entirely different in that I'm very excited for Professor Layton and the New World of Steam, which doesn't have a release date, and I am somewhat skeptical if it does actually come out this year, but I'm going to try to remain positive. And I mean, I love Professor Layton. I love the world. I love the aesthetic of it, and I'm excited to return to that in this. I don't love that they've, abandoned 2D character art animation for 3D models. But, like, what we've seen of it so far, like, I like the character animation, so I'm going to try to be a glass half full person about this and hope that I enjoy it.
How long has it been since the last game they released in that series?
I can't remember when the last, because they did the 3 main games and then the 3 prequels, which I played the prequels, but then they did some spin-off games that I never played. And it's definitely been, I feel like Level 5 kind of has wandered around trying to find their niche again. So it'll be interesting if this is a return to, like, greatness for them.
Yeah, I'm always down for a cozy mystery.
There's definitely some, like, heartbreak in there.
Oh, wow. Look at that. I do sort of love that juxtaposition of the really cutesy kitty graphics and hardcore emotional adult themes.
So what is your next game?
Okay, my next pick is a game called South of Midnight, which is a third-person action game developed by Compulsion Games. And there's actually 2 things that really have piqued my curiosity about this game. The first thing is definitely the setting. The setting is sort of this blend of magical realism and Southern Gothic and the deep American South, which I think we've seen something like that in, like, literature and movies. It kind of reminds me of, like, if you've ever read or watched the movie Big Fish. Also, I guess technically, like, Interview with the Vampire kind of merges those things too. There's also another book called The Peach Keeper, which kind of fits that vibe. But I feel like we've rarely seen that kind of setting in video games before.
Yeah, I think the only thing that comes to mind is the second Infamous.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of had a sliding scale of how it handled that.
Yeah, this one's definitely a little bit more like mythical creature fantasy type thing. I think the main character, her name is Hazel, and she's looking for her mother after a hurricane has sort of devastated this southern New Orleans-esque landscape. And the bits I've seen like in gameplay trailers where she's riding around on like a giant catfish. I just like the banter between them is really funny and evocative of that setting, which I really enjoy. Also, it has a really, really striking art style, too. It looks very similar to the Spider-Verse animated films, where it has that kind of like 3D mixed with stop-motion-y kind of aesthetic. And it also has a really appealing color palette. There's a lot of like purples and pastels throughout the game, which looks really nice. And yeah, I'm definitely very excited. I saw some bits of the actual gameplay and the action, too. It looked sort of similar to, I don't know if you've ever played Kena Bridge of Spirits. That sort of was like a Pixar-esque looking Zelda-like action-adventure game, which I really, really enjoyed. So I was getting a lot of vibes from that, too. And I definitely got the sense, too, that the developers are taking a lot of care to the music, because there are bits where when she encounters a boss, you sort of hear like this chanting, and you can really like make out the lyrics, and the lyrics are very evocative of, you know, whatever mythical creature you're encountering. Yeah, it sounds really, really cool, and yeah, I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, does that one have a release date?
So it doesn't have a defined release date yet, but it's supposed to come out in 2025, and it's supposed to actually be released for Game Pass on Xbox and also on PC.
How will you be playing it?
Gonna break out my Samsung. The old Samsung TV. What's good about this is since it has that stop motion aesthetic, maybe the lag on my TV will not be as apparent.
Maybe it doesn't have a stop motion aesthetic, and that's just...
Yeah, it's just my bad internet connection. But I think there's some whispers that it might eventually come out on PlayStation as well. But right now it's only Xbox and PC.
Ha, 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 ha.
All right. What is your next book, Charlotte?
Ignoring entirely what you've just been talking about and getting back to coziness, my next pick is, so I was a big fan of the first 2 Emily Wilde books. Look, I can build my
nice
little
covers.
fort. Yeah, they're so pretty. And the next one is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, coming out in February. I know my previous book pick, I was just talking about how it's nice to have a male and a female lead character who aren't romantically entwined. This is very much romantasy, and I guess going off on my like soapbox about romantasy, I hate a lot of it because a lot of it is like barely fantasy. It's just like a romance that they threw some like
It's like a talking
fantasy
frog or
elements on it.
something.
But this one, like, I love the world, I love the characters, and I like that like the world building really does drive like what's happening to the characters. Like, it is a fantasy world. I enjoy it very much. And also, again, it's like I don't go for romance plots where it's like, oh, the male lead is like the ultimate like perfect man. Like Wendell in these books is like very much a gremlin, and like no one should have to deal with him. If you haven't stepped into like romantasy but you want to, and you want something like more on the fantasy side rather than just pure romance, like Emily Wilde is there for you. I'm so excited for the third one. I got my mom to read these, even though she's not like a fantasy or romance person at all. So read them. You'll have a good time.
So my big question is, do the spines match? Because I don't know if you've ever seen that TikTok where like the guy is like flipping out where long-running series don't have matching spines. So this one looks pretty solid, so he'll be happy about that.
And I mean, the first word in the title of the first book is map. So I mean, Jonathan should be all over this.
Yes, I am a low-key mapophile.
Low key.
Yeah, I definitely agree, though. I hate when one of the characters in a romance is like this idolized version, either through the other character's eyes or just in general. It definitely flaws make the man, as they say. Or no one says that, but I enjoy a good flawed person.
But yeah, what's your book pick?
My next book pick is called Two Truths and a Lie by Corey O'Brien. And this book actually has 3 of my favorite things.
Two truths and a lie?
No, not that. It is a cyberpunk, neo-noir murder mystery, and water. So it takes it takes place in this it's like a fully submerged future dystopian version of Los Angeles where
BioShock.
That's exactly what I thought, yeah. I was going to say, and it's also like a world where memories can be bought and sold. So immediately my mind went to like a merging of like Blade Runner and BioShock vibes, which is it's definitely up my alley. So the main character is an aging combat drone veteran who
I
gets...
feel like we could break down every single word of that sentence.
A little bit of a loaded word. And they get pulled into this murder investigation of a top executive, and one of the prime suspects is an old boyfriend who you haven't talked to in a while. So yeah, it's definitely one of those neo-noir rabbit holes where you encounter mega-corporate oligarchs, militarized police forces, emancipated AIs, and all that good neon-soaked cyber goodness, which I really can't get enough of. The other cool thing about this author, Corey O'Brien, is that he's also worked on video games before. And a couple of games, he wrote for this one game called Monster Prom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you heard of that?
I've played it.
Oh, you have? Oh, nice. And
Which is like, I feel like that's such a, like you describing this book and then saying Monster Prom is such a funny combo.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Nice. The other one he did, which I haven't played either, it's a mobile game called Hollow Vista, where the premise is you're a junior architect and you're tasked with photographing this like opulent mansion, but the mansion starts like dissecting your own personality and like breaking you down.
Hate when that happens.
Yeah, I'm always very fascinated when people in the video game space kind of make the jump towards novels. They have a particular approach towards narrative design. It's interesting to see how that translates into just straight fiction. This guy, he also has a really good sense of humor. He's written a couple of humorous historical guidebooks, which have really funny titles. One is called, I think, Zeus Grants Stupid Wishes, and the other one's called George Washington is Cash Money. So great titles. And yeah, I'm very, very excited for this book. Two Truths and a Lie comes out March 4th. All right, Charlotte, what is your next and final game?
I decided to pick Ghost of Yōtei for my third and last one, which I feel like it was kind of my caveat of like, this is the one like I know really big, like it's on everyone's list. I feel like I'm kind of in an interesting place with that series because I really love Ghost of Tsushima. I like played it so much when it came out. I like unlocked so many things in it, was trying to like 100% it, but it was definitely like once I was done with it, I kind of, like put it on a shelf, didn't come back to it. I still haven't gotten around to like the DLC.
Yeah, neither
so
have I, yeah.
It's like, I feel like this Ghost of Yōtei coming out is kind of like an old friend coming to visit. I'm like, I did have fun with you. I'm excited for you. Welcome back.
Are you going to replay the original before the next one?
In my mind, I want to say yes. In my heart, where I know the amount of time I have to commit to things, I don't know. But it is like, I know since I played it, you know, like remastered version has come out, etc.
Yeah. I bought that expansion PS5 version. I haven't actually played it yet. You know, it's weird because I did enjoy it. I only played it the one time when it first came out. I really liked some of their innovations with just the open world design and how you sort of got notified of different points of interest on the map with, like, I think you like follow a fox, or like the wind kind of subtly blows in different directions, which I thought was really cool. The thing with the story, though, I really like the premise. I love the idea that the main character, he's sort of like torn between becoming like a ninja, which is seen as this amoral, dishonorable way of life, versus, you know, being like a more straight-laced samurai, I guess. And I love that idea, but I feel like they could have maybe explored that a little bit more with the consequences of the gameplay. I thought it would have been cool if you were, you know, being like a ninja, maybe that would have like a dynamic effect on like how characters interact with you and the world. But they seem to be like kind of divergent in that sense.
Yeah, I feel like I also enjoyed that obviously any samurai media is going to be kind of, you know, like overdoing what samurais actually were. But I do feel like there was kind of, you know, it was basing it on some of the history going on there, especially with like, you know, the isolation period of Japan, et cetera, and like where samurai fit into the whole history of Japan.
So what are your opinions on the fact that this is, I don't know exactly how much later it is. I think it's like hundreds of years after the events of Ghost of Tsushima, right? So is that something you're excited about, or were you hoping to get more of the original timeline and characters?
There are many games where like when they switch to another character, I'm like, oh, I wanted to go back to the person that like I liked. But I feel like it was a game where it's like, oh yeah, this story was kind of told. I'm ready to like...
That's kind of how I felt. Even without playing the DLC, I felt like, you know, it did wrap up in a somewhat satisfying way. I love the idea how like the ghost is like become this myth, and it's almost like Batman, where it's like a mantle that new people could potentially take up and carry on the tradition. I think that's like a really cool concept.
Just like how the entire galaxy forgot Jedi existed in the course of 18 years.
Yeah. How did they do it? All right.
So what's your last game?
So my last game probably has the worst title. It's called Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Ringing any bells?
Those are just words.
Yeah, but it does look really, really good. It's by this French developer called Sandfall Interactive. This is a dark fantasy RPG. It's set in an era that's loosely based on, I don't know if you're familiar with the French period. It's called like La Belle Époque, which is late 19th century, early 20th century. It's sort of like that period of prosperity in France that was between the Napoleonic Wars and the World Wars. So there was a lot of like advances in architecture, art, technology, and this version of the world, there's basically this entity called the Paintress, and every year she sort of wakes up and paints a number on this monolith. And
yes, the monolith.
Yes. And anyone who matches that age, they sort of get Thanos'd into dust. And every year the number gets smaller and smaller. So, you know, one year it's like 45. Everyone who's 45 years old, just like poof, they're gone. And then the next year it's 44. You take control of the party members of Expedition 33, and they're tasked with trying to basically kill the Paintress so she doesn't have an opportunity to mass murder everyone who's 33 years old. There's so much that looks amazing about this game. First of all, the graphics look incredible. It's a really, really cool looking world. It really has that like dreamlike painterly quality to it. A lot of the enemy designs are like really, really out there. That looks fantastic. And it's got turn-based battles, and it looks like it definitely takes a lot of nods from the Persona games with like the really stylized menus and cool abilities that you can do. And the other cool thing about it is it looks like it really utilizes real-time rhythm-based mechanics in the turn-based combat, a la like maybe like a Super Mario RPG, or if you've ever played Legend of Dragoon, if anyone remembers that game. All that like really, really excites me. And I don't know, like I'm kind of ready for a decidedly French RPG. There's even a character that fights with a baguette, so you can't get much more French than that. Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is currently slated for release sometime in the summer of 2025.
So my final book recommendation is one that's actually like very game adjacent in that The title is This Is Not a Game by Kelly Mullen. It's a murder mystery, but the kind of like unique twist of this one is it's about a woman who recently divorced her husband. They made a game together, and he basically took all of the, like, he stole everything from her and gave her nothing.
Hate when that happens.
And yeah, so they made this like murder mystery game together, and she goes to this like remote island with her grandma is there, and their like host ends up getting murdered, and so she's like, oh boy, we have to solve this mystery now, and I'm an expert because I just did a game about this.
I love how now that the video game industry in general is becoming so big and expansive, how you're seeing it. Obviously, we see it bleed into movies and television a lot more nowadays, but now you're starting to see it bleed into literature as well, where you have a lot of people who are not necessarily entrenched in the game industry, but they're still like writing about characters in that industry or writing about game designers. And I always think it's very fascinating to see like how they can take their like outside perspective into that world.
Yeah, and I feel like any gamer who is like around our age is very used to, you know, seeing media that portrays, you know, like gamers and game production as like very like comically not what it is like at all.
Yeah.
But Kelly Mullen is actually, she has worked on marketing for like major games like Roblox, etc.
Oh, nice.
And she has worked in that space, even though she's not specifically a game designer. She has, you know, the knowledge and the connections to kind of, I hope, make a like very authentic representation of like what a game designer's mindset would be. I also feel like this is probably a good one, you know, like say you are a gamer and you want to kind of connect more with your family and like especially, you know, like an older mom or a grandma who is, you know, maybe into stuff like Richard Osman, like Thursday Murder Club. It's like this is a good book, I think, to kind of share between, you know, people who are like, I love games, and someone who's more like, oh, I love these like mysteries.
Have you ever played that game Open Roads, which was dealing with like an older mom and her daughter who go off on like a road trip? That was a really cool game.
That sounds like my life.
My final book pick is called The Missing Half by Ashley Flowers with Alex Keister.
It feels like we're really going hard on murder mysteries in 2025.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I'm the kind of person, I love murder mysteries, especially when they're set in like small rural towns. But yeah, in this one, it's about a young woman whose sister mysteriously disappears, and you know the cops don't have any leads, and you know there's never any information that's revealed about what exactly happened to her. And the story takes place about like 6 years later, and predictably her life kind of goes to crap, and she's sort of struggling, and another woman pops up, and apparently her sister also disappeared right around the same time, and she offers the main character like a little bit of a kernel of hope about what exactly happened. And it takes place in like a small town in Indiana. And yeah, like I was saying, I just really like sort of dark mysteries that take place in these like small unassuming towns where part of the discovery of the inner workings of the town and its characters is usually like intertwined with the unraveling of the mystery. So I really like that dynamic.
Yeah, that's something like I really want to see someone do something with the aesthetic of, you know, like East Coast beaches and their kind of like dilapidated sadness.
The other thing that of note about the author Ashley Flowers is she's also a host of a very popular crime podcast called Crime Junkie. She's also written another book which also deals with a murder mystery set in Indiana as well. And yeah, like I said, I just love learning about new places, especially with mystery stories. And I don't know a ton about Indiana other than the fact that I very much dislike their basketball team. The Missing Half comes out May 6th. Just to wrap things up, is there anything of note that you're playing or reading that you'd want to call out, Charlotte?
Yeah, so I like went on such a reading binge over the holidays. Like,
yeah, same.
I finally got time to read through Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, and that was so good. My household has now bought it at full retail price twice. And currently I'm reading Say Nothing, which is about the Troubles in Ireland, and like, because that's always a period in time that I've been aware of and just wanted more like background and just kind of, you know, like perspective of like, oh, these things happen, but like what was the general like sentiment about it.
Have you ever seen that movie, is it The Banshees of Inisherin?
No.
That's the one with Colin Farrell and oh my God, what is his name? I think it's Brandon Gleeson. But yeah, I think it's a very funny and interesting dynamic between the two of them. But I think it's very much like allegorical of like the conflict in Ireland.
Yeah. And then on the game front, I have been playing a lot of Infinity Nikki, which, I mean, at first I was like, oh, I don't know if I can get into this. And then now I'm like scouring everywhere for dress up materials. And also I've been playing through Grounded, which you would not like because they're giant spiders.
Ugh. Wait, is that the one where you're like, you get shrunk?
Yeah.
Ugh. Doesn't that one have an arachnophobia mode where it turns them into like balloons?
Like the spiders are really like scary in that game.
Why? Can we think of something else? Like, why is it always spiders? How long has it been since The Hobbit?
I mean, there are also other giant bugs. The ladybugs in that game
go.
make such cute noises.
Yeah, I'm down with the giant ladybug.
And what have you been doing?
Yeah, same with me. I was definitely catching up on a lot of reading over the holidays. See, for me, I really ended up going down this rabbit hole of trying to read children and young adult fantasy novels that I just missed when I was growing up. So I started to read Ursula Le Guin's Tales of Earthsea. So I got this massive binded book which has all of them together, and it's also like an illustrated version too. So
that sounds like a nightmare to handle.
It's gigantic. Yeah, it is pretty big. I can only read it on my couch because I have to like rest it on a pillow. It's awesome. I love how it's kind of dark, even though it is for children. And there's just like a very interesting philosophical approach to the magic. Like the power of things is directly tied to knowing their true nature and knowing their true name, and everything has like a true name that the wizards can somehow ascertain through their powers. The other one is His Dark Materials, which I've never read. So I finally started reading The Golden Compass. I'm about halfway through that. Awesome.
Yeah, that's like,
really like it.
I've always wanted to like experience Percy Jackson. I read the first book when I was in high school, which was like, it was like I wasn't into it then because it was a little, middle school age.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I want to know, but it's just hard to invest in that now.
Yeah, my students always like rave about the Percy Jackson books. I think that's really popular with like the 20-somethings. I'm excited to finish His Dark Materials because actually Philip Pullman, he has a book, I think it's a children's book that's coming out this year. So maybe we can pick his brain a little bit.
That just reminded me another book that I'm actually excited for.
Oh, what? Go for it.
So Louis Sacker, the guy who did like Wayside Story,
Wayside Story?
Wayside School,
oh, no,
and like
I
all
don't
those
know what
ones.
those are.
Like he has an adult fantasy novel coming out this year, and I'm so interested to like see the guy who wrote like all these crazy kid stories that I loved as a kid write like adult fantasy.
Yeah, I'm always pumped when like an author who's known for either a particular genre or age group makes like a dramatic shift. It's always interesting to see how that goes. As far as games, so the two games I'm playing right now, they're actually games that have sequels coming out very soon. So I'm sort of playing those to sort of prep for the sequels. This is also like a sneaky way for me to talk about more games I'm excited about. But one of them is called Citizen Sleeper, which is a text-based RPG that's very much inspired by tabletop games. So there's like dice rolls and you click around on like this space station. It has such a cool premise though. When people have unmanageable debt, they can go to a corporation and they can sell their personality so that they get put in cryo sleep, and then their personality gets like carbon copied into an android, and then the android works off the debt while you sleep. And you play as one of the sleepers, those androids, and you're kind of like escaped, and you have to kind of like find your way on this space station and do all these like odd jobs. And
It's like reminiscent of Severance to me.
Oh, the TV show? Interesting. Yeah, I think the official tagline is role-playing in the ruins of interplanetary capitalism. So that has a sequel coming out called Citizen Sleeper 2, the Starward Vector. Yeah. And even more interesting is that I am going to be interviewing the developer of that game very soon too. So if you're interested in Citizen Sleeper, definitely check that out on our channel when it pops up. And the other game I'm playing is Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is a medieval simulator. It's very much in the style of like Skyrim in terms of like huge open world. It has like sword fighting, pickpocketing, and lock picking, except in this version, like everything is insanely difficult. So even just like, jimmying open like a lock or something is like incredibly hard. You have to do all this like balancing with the two with the controllers. But I really like it because it does make you feel like you are like earning your place in the world. And yeah, that has a sequel coming out very soon. I think it's coming out February 4th, called Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I feel like we should say one note, just because we didn't talk about Grand Theft Auto 6, and I feel like the reason why we didn't is because, first of all, we did this same kind of format last year, and we talked about it then. And also, there hasn't really been any additional news or trailers since we talked about it, right?
Yeah, also, I feel like it's just like, it's obvious.
Yeah.
But also, like, I feel like there's a good chance that it's 2026 instead
That's
of
the other thing,
2025.
too. Yeah. I was also interested in Death Stranding, too. That's another one that I feel like might get pushed back, though. But that's it for our video. And yeah, anything you want to say, Charlotte, that we didn't cover?
No, leave.
All right. Take care.